everybody, back with the E93. Today I wanted to make a video going over the entire cost. So I have a spreadsheet of all the stuff that I bought with links and everything, so I'll put that in the description below. That way if you guys want to do a rebuild on your N54, you can kind of pick and choose what you want and see what I use. So if you haven't already watched, I rebuilt this E93 335i. When I bought it, it had coolant in the oil, and so I thought it may be the oil filter housing gasket, but the coolant was actually draining into the oil pan when the car was off. It wasn't happening when the car was on, so I determined it was a hole in the block, so I just went right to work and pulled the engine. From there, we went and bought an unknown condition engine off of OfferUp for 200 bucks, and we rebuilt that, so you can watch that whole series. I'll put it up here so you can watch it. It's the biggest project I've ever done, so I'm pretty proud of myself, but now we're going to dive into the cost. So it's a pretty expensive project. Not all the time does this make sense. I think it might make sense on this car if I ever decide to sell it. That's not the case. Right now my plan is just to keep it and just have fun with it. I think eventually I might sell the F10 in this car and get an E92 M3, but we'll see how that goes. So let's dive into the cost. So I'll pull up the spreadsheet. So obviously one of the biggest costs with this car and this build was the actual car. So I paid $3,300 from this. I found it on OfferUp. It's low mileage. It only has 80,000 miles on it. So I'm not sure what actually caused the failure. I think it might have been a leaky injector, but who knows. So it's low miles, in great condition. I bought it from the original owner. And so I figured, you know what, this is my chance to, build a bunch of content for you guys, challenge myself, and also get a car for less than what it would pay, or less than what I would pay if I bought an $80,000 or 80,000 mile E93 on the open market. So $3,300 for that. And then the engine block that I got was $200. So I just found it on OfferUp. I drove out, picked it up. Guy seemed pretty nice and trustworthy, so figured I would take the risk on that. And I figured, you know what? Either way, I'm rebuilding the whole thing, so it doesn't really matter too much. And then from there, I decided to do the rod bearings. So I use King rod bearings. I don't know that this is necessary on these cars, especially if you're redoing injectors and things like that. They don't really tend to go unless you get leaky injectors and you have a lot of fuel in your oil. So I just did it just because I didn't know if there was a spun rod bearing or what on the $200 engine that I got. So I figured I'd do that. So those were $85 from FCP Euro. And then I got new rod bolts. The new rod bolts were $45.48. And then you have to get oil pump bolts. So a lot of the bolts on this car are one-time use because they're aluminum and they stretch. So you can't reuse them, or they'll most likely snap. So the oil pump bolts were $22. And then you have to get a new oil pan, especially if you're going to be doing, or a new oil pan gasket, especially if you're going to be doing the rod bearings. But those tend to leak pretty frequently on these cars. So if you have the engine out, you 100% should do the oil pan gasket. So the oil pan gasket was $60. And I also had to get the oil pan bolts. So the oil pan bolts were another $44. So from there, I made sure I did the valve cover. So the valve cover gasket, I believe, was $29. And the valve cover gasket, you can reuse those bolts. Those bolts are not aluminum, so you don't need a bolt kit for that. I had a OEM valve cover, so I kept that. And then the water pump. So water pumps on these cars tend to go bad pretty frequently. I didn't know the history if it had been changed or not, so I decided to go ahead and get one of those water pump kits from FCP Euro. That was $436. So that came with a water pump and the thermostat and everything you need for that. So that was one of the more expensive things on this build. So if you've already done that recently, you probably don't need to do it. However, it is way easier to do it with the engine out of the car. I did a front main seal. So the front main seal is a special process. You have to get special sealant and primer and an injector tool and everything. So if you're going to do the front main seal, I highly recommend just getting the full kit. It's going to make your life way easier. Don't try to Mickey Mouse it. You don't want to have to pull that back out or have a leak. So that kit was $128. However, you can use that sealant to also use it on the rear main seal. And the rear main seal, I believe, was only $45. So to do both of them at the same time is probably worth it. They don't tend to leak that much on these cars. So You don't necessarily have to do them. So it's up to you. If it's not leaking, you probably don't want to disturb it. If it is leaking, definitely change it. And then I did get new fuel injectors. So fuel injectors, I got Index 12 fuel injectors off of OfferUp. They were pretty much brand new. So I ended up buying those for $500. And I needed new decouplers and new seals. So the new decouplers and seals were about $70. I needed a new upper radiator hose because the one that I had was showing signs of failing. So that was another $30. I ended up buying a sandblaster from Harbor Freight. That was $20, and I used that so I could walnut blast the intake valves. And then the turbos, I ended up paying $650 for the turbos. What I ended up going with, and I know a lot of people said I should have went with upgraded inlets and outlets and all that stuff, but I wanted to keep the OEM look. I'm not going for big power. I wanted to make, high 300s, low 400s, and pretty sure this car makes it, but I went with rebuilt OEM turbos from a guy I met through the N54 groups. He's a really cool guy, but he ended up rebuilding them for his car and he never put them in. So they were fully ceramic coated. They had upgraded charas, and they were completely rebuilt with new wastegates and everything like that. So $650 shipped. I'm very happy with those and the friend that I made. So then I ended up getting a charge pipe off of eBay. Those are hit or miss. I luckily got a hit, but sometimes they can fit really poorly and have bad fitment and stuff like that. So that was $60, worth the risk for me because it ended up turning out okay. And then I got eBay downpipes. So those are fully catless downpipes, and those were $140 off of eBay. And then I got a upgraded intercooler. That was $240 on eBay. And then I replaced some coil packs, $130 for the coil packs, and $60 for the spark plugs. Some of the other things that I needed that were kind of miscellaneous were I bought a digital torque wrench. So I bought the Quinn one from Harbor Freight. It was on sale for $100. I highly recommend that. New floor mats, those were $130. I got OEM floor mats. If you've seen the upgraded or the $50 mods video, you saw that I spent $31 on the mirror caps. I spent $30 on the headlight bulbs. I spent $11 on the side markers. I spent $30 on the front grille. There was some miscellaneous stuff that I got. So I got the aluminum oil cap instead of the plastic one. So I'm very happy with that. And that only cost $40. And then I got a catch can kit off of eBay. That was $40. I needed a new oil level sensor. That was $30. Crankcase breather hose. Mine was cracked and broken, so that was $30. And then I bought a new felt insulation for the hood. That was $70. And then a dual cone intake. That was $90. And then a Mickey Mouse coolant flange for under the oil filter housing. That was $10 on eBay. And then everything else was maybe nuts and bolts and stuff like that. So I needed new bolts to attach the transmission, so bell housing bolts to attach the transmission. So I spent about $30 on bolts for that. I needed a new access cover for the torque converter, so that was $10. And then the oil filter housing, I had done that before, but that kit on FCP Euro, I believe, is about $70. So, and then coolant, oil, and power steering fluid, that's another $100 right there. So all in all, the total cost for the build, all the parts and pieces, was $4,114. On top of that, I spent $3,300 on the car. So we have about $7,400. So that includes all the upgrades and stuff like that. So $7,400 for this car, I think, is a great deal. It's probably worth a lot more. Obviously, I had to spend some money on some tools outside of the torque wrench and stuff. So I bought a hoist, I bought some engine stands and things like that. So if you figure another $500 or $600 in tools, I was probably into this whole thing for about $8,000. So I do believe this car would sell for more than $8,000 considering the mileage and all the maintenance has been done, all the upgrades it has, and considering I kept it pretty much OEM. So there's some upgrades on there, but I did it tastefully that the car will still run and drive as a daily. So also one thing I forgot is I did an MHD tune, so that was probably another $200. So let's say $8,200 on this build. So I believe this car would cost more on OfferUp or Facebook Marketplace than $8,200 given the mileage and condition and the fact that all of the maintenance has been done. versus most of the cars that have this mileage or have more mileage are going to need a ton of maintenance. So you don't have to worry about any of that. I don't plan to sell it or flip it, but if I did, I think I would be okay covering the cost of this build. Plus, I got to make some content and do something I really enjoyed. So if you haven't seen the rest of the videos, make sure you go and watch. I appreciate all the guys who comment, watch, like the videos. It helps out the channel a bunch. We still have some more planned for this car. Obviously, I'm going to do the stereo and the backup cam. And I have some more plans to do wheels. We need to fix some stuff cosmetically and do a full detail and stuff like that. So there's more to come on this car. It's not finished. I also have another N54 car coming probably at the end of this month. So that'll be the next build. So stay tuned for that. So that's it. So if you were curious of how much it would cost you to fully refresh your car or your N54, that's kind of what you're going to spend. You're going to spend about, probably somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000 depending on the quality of materials that you use if you're doing all the labor. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button, drop a like, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. I'm just really trying to show you no love. Say you tired and you need a new love. Use what you got for your lose love. See new things with your views of. Yeah, what you want, new things.